Yes, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to welcome all the participants who have you are in this room. Yesterday, we had discussed about the project life cycle. So, where I told you about the different phases of project life cycle. What is the first step in project life cycle, and in between, that is from starting to last. What are the different phases of project life cycle? In connection with that, we have a continued part that is a project risk assessment. So everyone are aware about what is a risk, and there is a saying that is risk is always better than regret. Whatever industry we choose, right? So it is common that in every industry there is some risk. There is no such industry without any risk. Here, we are concentrating only on the industries where the maximum amount of risk, right? So that too, we are not unaware of this kind of a risk, right? So that is risk will just come and hit our face. In construction industries, usually what happens, we are not aware of the kind of risk we are going to face. Though with the sound planning, we are not aware what kind of risk we are going to face in between the project execution. So now, in this session, I will let you know what are the different stages of this risk assessment, what is risk, and what are the different types of risks, and so on. So now, starting with the basic definition of this, risk is any unexpected event that can affect your project. That project, for this context, I'll be considering the construction of a building. For the construction of building, if I consider this as a project, there are some things which will arise unexpectedly during the execution of an event. Here, in every project, we need to plan in such a way that we need to have the minimum risk, or we need to mitigate the risk which arises without our uh, uh, if we are not thinking about that risk, sometimes it will come and arise. We need to have a plan for mitigating that risk. Here, what is the importance of this risk? Why we have to concentrate more on the risk even before starting of a project? Here, the need here is very simple, right? So this will help in calculating the uncertainties and also predict their impact, consequently giving organizations a basis upon which they can make decisions. Risk is something which is unexpected, as I told you, right? So when the risk will come and slap us, we will not come to know, right? So unless it hits our face, we will not come to know what are the different risks we are going to encounter. So here, before starting any project, we need to be aware of the different kinds of risks which are about to come. Here, that is the significance of this risk. If one starts the project without having any awareness about the risk, obviously he will be in trouble. That is the reason why we need to give due respect to the risks which are about to come. Next, is it possible to manage the risk? Yes, obviously we can manage the risk. But this risk management, it is to be a systematic process, right? So in this systematic process, right, so our approach should be like this. You can see this picture here. Identification, it is very important. The first stage here is identification, right? So we must be able to identify the risks. Identification of risk means, right? So what are the different risks which are about to come in a project? That is, say for example, if we are planning to build a building, there are different kind of risks which will come during the execution phase of a project. So if we are talented enough, right? So if we are having some uh, site about how the different sources of risk will come and hit this project, so we can able to identify so before the risk hits our face. So here, whenever we are talking about this risk management, right? So either we are trying to mitigate the risk. Mitigation means it is lowering the impact of a risk, right? So the best example for this is, so we have, you might have heard about this life insurance corporation, right? So this life insurance corporations will be giving the policies to the persons, right? So here for giving the policy, right? So they are collecting some premiums. Say for example, right? So if I want insurance of 1 crore rupees, right? So I need to pay 10,000 rupees of premium every year. By paying 10,000 rupees of premium every year, I am mitigating my risk. Even something happens to me, so the LIC will be taking care of family, right? So that is, they will be giving 1 crore rupees to my home, right? So what I am doing here is, by just paying 10,000 rupees, I am mitigating my risk, or I am reducing the impact of the risk, right? So here, why we need to identify the risk here is, if we know what is the kind of risk, I can able to mitigate the risk, right? So without knowing anything about the risk, it is not possible for us to mitigate or lowering the impact of a risk, right? So that is the first step here. In the first step, we need to identify, right? So what are the different risks, right? So which is putting problem for us. And the second step here is the source, right? So there are different sources that will be posing different challenges during the execution of a project. The sources, like, say for example, yesterday I told you something about the management of 3 M's, that is machinery, material, and manpower, right? So these three things what I have told you, right? So all these things can pose problem for us. For example, say for example, if I consider the material, right? So there may be non availability of a material because of some strike or something, right? So it will hinder the progression of our project. Similarly, if the labors are in strike, right? So if they are demanding for something, right? So automatically they will be hindering our progress. Similarly, if something happens to the machinery, that will also become a source of a problem. So here we need to identify what is the source for the problem. Then only we can take necessary steps for mitigating that risk. The third step here is the measurement, right? So how to measure this risk? There are different ways of measuring this risk, right? So in the coming slide, I will let you know what are the different risk measurement types. Measuring the risk means what is the impact, measurement of the impact of a particular risk. There are some small issues and there are some big issues. So here we need to address, right? So what is the exact problem which has happened? Accordingly, we need to take some steps. And the step number 4 here is evaluation. What is the cause of a risk, right? So what is the source of a risk? How big the risk is? These things we know. Next is to evaluate, right? So why this is happening, and what are all the different approaches we should have for this, right? So to overcome this burden or to overcome this challenge, what are all the different steps we have? Say for example, if the laborers are in strike, right? So there are different ways of approaching this problem. That is, either we can console the laborers, either we can pay higher rates, or we can bring laborers from some other sites. There are different approaches. So here, evaluation means we are evaluating the different alternatives, right? So for a single problem, we may have 4 or 5 number of solutions. So here, what we are doing here is very simple. We are trying all the alternative. Which one is found feasible, we will be going with that. That is what we are doing in a stage 4, that is evaluation. And the next stage here is mitigation. As I told you already, mitigation means reducing the impact of a risk. Say for example, if some problem comes, that is in a construction industry, there is some hazard. If the hazard takes place, there are different ways of mitigating this problem, right? if some labors, right, so some labors will stuck somewhere, or some labors they just fell from some 10th floor or 11th floor, right? These are all the different risks in the construction industry. If something this event like happens, automatically they will be claiming some 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs for the builders, from the builders. So how best I can mitigate this risk is, I will be taking some insurance policy for my laborers. If something happens, right, so this corporations who are uh, taking the premium from me, right, so they will be taking care of this uh, whatever the loss which has happened, right, so they will be taking care of this loss. So here, mitigation means I'll be transferring my risk to others by paying some premium. So that I can do, right? So insuring all my labors, insuring all my machineries, right? So by doing this, automatically I'll be mitigating my risks into some others, right? So if something goes wrong, they will intervene and they will be taking care of whatever the loss which has happened in my site. So that is what the step here, mitigation, right? So that is also very, very important, right? So in any organization, in any company, right? So they will not be completely taking all the risks, right? So they will be taking a part of risk, and the remaining part they want to mitigate to others. So that is very, very important. Otherwise, it will lead to a bigger problems. And next one is monitoring. As usual, yesterday I told you what is monitoring and all, how best we are mitigating this risk, right? So how best our evaluation is, and how we have encountered this problem, and all these things we need to monitor, right? So if the problem has subsided, then we can stop it there itself. If the problem is still there, then we have to go for the other methods of evaluation, thereby mitigating the risk and all, right? So this process continues. So it all starts from identifying the problem, right? So what is the risk we need to identify, and what is the cause for the risk, that is the source that we need to identify. So it is without knowing the source of a risk, if we are trying to mitigate that, it is not possible to achieve. We must know what is the source from where this risk is arising. Then we need to know, right? So what is the risk type, whether it is a small risk or it is a big risk, right? So this measurement will give you a clear idea about what is the type of risk, whether it is a big one or small one. Accordingly, we need to have some evaluation process, right? So evaluation is, we need to fix this risks by taking different alternatives. Say for example, so if I have to go with option number one, then it will be costing me much, right? So if I am going for problem number one for mitigating the risk, it will be costing me 10 lakhs. So if I go with option number two, it will be costing me 5 lakh rupees. If I have a multiple choices like this, option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which one I have to go for, I'll be selecting that in the evaluation step. So after that, I'll be starting the mitigation, I reducing the risk, and finally I'll be checking whether the step, whatever I have taken, whether it is working or not. That is what the risk management process is all about. So next is risk assessment. This is the process of identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risk. Risk assessment needs to be systematic, iterative, and collaborative using the stakeholders' knowledge. Here, we need to understand what is this risk assessment. So as I told you in the previous slide, so we need to measure the risk. Assessing the risk is no, no different, right? So it is same as the risk measuring, right? So what are the different ways we can measure the risk? Here you can see the different type of risk analysis. One is the qualitative risk, another one is a quantitative risk. We need to understand what is qualitative and what is quantitative first. Here, qualitative is about the person's perception. Try to understand it clearly. The qualitative risk is all about the person's perception, and quantitative risk is about the statistical analysis. I will just go by the definition here. The qualitative risk analysis is the risk assessment done by the experts on the project teams who use data from past projects and their expertise to estimate the impact and probability value of each risk on a scale or a risk matrix. So in a simple terms, how to understand this is qualitative is all about the quality of a risk. Quality. Quality means it is based on the perception. Say for example, if I have constructed one building, there may be different views of the persons. Different persons will be having different opinions. Different persons will be having different perceptions about my construction. Somebody will be saying the construction is very poor. Somebody will be saying the construction is average. Somebody will be saying the construction is good. It all depends upon the persons and their expertise. Here, quantitative risk, it should be having some data for talking. That is, quantitative risk analysis is the statistical analysis of the effect of those identified risks on the overall project. This helps project managers and team leaders to make decisions with reduced uncertainty and supports the process of controlling risk. So, in simple words, quantitative risk analysis is about the quantity. So we can tell this in the statistical terms. So if any loss comes into a company, that will be in terms of numbers. 6,000 crores of loss, right? So that is a number, right? So that will be considered as a quantitative risk. So if something goes wrong with the brand of a company, so that will be a qualitative risk. Try to understand the simple terms, qualitative and quantitative. Anything about the quality of a product, it is about the qualitative. Anything about the numbers, it is about the quantitative risk. The loss will be in terms of numbers, that is a quantitative risk, and the product name, it is a qualitative risk. So here, without knowing the types of risks, it is not possible to analyze the risk. It is not possible to mitigate the risks. That is why we need to classify the risk, whether it is a qualitative risk or quantitative risk. So once we classify this, then we will go for identifying the solutions, how to come out from this risk. After that, we will try to mitigate, and finally we will be reviewing it. That is about the different types of risks. And one more thing you need to understand here is in the quantitative risk, you can see the project managers are more viable for this. If any risk comes, right? So if something goes wrong in the project, always the project managers are responsible. Or in the absence of project manager, the whole project team is responsible for this risk. Right? So that is very, very important. And no clients are responsible, no vendors are responsible, no builders are responsible for taking the risk. It is only the project manager and the project teams are responsible for the risks. Right? So that is very, very important. You need to understand. Next. So this is the risk management profile. You can see on the x-axis, it is about the cost. On the y-axis, it is the likelihood, right? So it is very easy to understand. So we have a range of outcomes, right? So we have a range of outcomes, right? So the chances of success, you can see, right? So chances of success and risk of project budget, risk to business. That is, there is every possibility that any business can turn into a loss. Why it happens is because of the wrong selection of a material, whatever it is, right? So if it is a manufacturing unit, the wrong selection of raw material, right? So improper selection of a technology, right? So all these things leads to the different range of outcomes. For the better understanding of this, I'll be considering one construction industry here. In construction industry, there are different possibilities. That is, the chances are very high that we will be getting a different range of outcomes. The best example here is, say for example, I'm taking one contract to build a building. So the stipulated time for this is 3 months. Within 3 months, I need to complete the building. If everything goes right, if everything is in my favor, I'll be completing my task within the time, that is within 3 months, I'll be completing the building. If that happens, automatically the chances of success or making profitability or turning my business into a profit will be higher. So if the things go wrong, right, so if the time delay is there, right, so instead of completing my project in 3 months, if it takes 4 months, automatically I have to incur some losses. That is also a possibility. And if I am not able to complete the project within the time, or even if I take 2 more months for this, if I am not able to complete, right, so I need to face some losses. Right, so that is the different range of outcomes you need to understand. Right, so even I can turn this into a successful project, and there is every possibility that, right, so it may go wrong and I may be in a big trouble. Right, so that is, I may incur some losses. Right, so that is also a possibility. Right, so in every project, right, so the risk will be there. Right, so here how we are going to manage the risk matters a lot. So next is the project cost risk analysis. Once again, with the same example, I'll be continuing this slide. Right, so imagine I am taking a project, that is the construction of a building. Right, so here there are some risks, that is the project cost risk will be there and the project time risk will be there. So here, first I'll be discussing on the project cost risk analysis, right? So it is very, very simple. Cost risk analysis considered the different costs associated with a project. The different costs here are the cost of labor, the cost of materials, the cost of equipment, the cost of administration, and so on. And it focuses on the uncertainties and the risks that may affect these costs. In simple terms, you can understand this slide like this. Say, for example, I have taken one building construction project. Initially, that is quoted for 30 lakhs. Right? So there is an agreement between me and the vendor. Right? So that is someone will be giving me this contract for 30 lakhs for the completion of one-story building. At the time of taking this project, right, so the labor, it is 500 rupees per day, and the cost of materials are, say for example, it is a nominal kind of a market where the cost of materials are not that high, and the equipments are easily available, and my administration charges were also very less. Right, so with this scenario, I'll be taking one project. As soon as I take my project, right, so there will be the some uncertainties, like labor strike may happen. Laborers are demanding for more wages, right? So instead of 500 rupees, they will be asking 1,000 rupees per day, and there may be a shortage in materials, or there may be a price hike in the materials. That is also a risk. Why? Because, so what is the present market condition? Based on that price, I'll be agreeing with a contract for 30 lakhs. If something goes wrong, if the price of a steel goes high, if the price of a cement goes high, automatically I have to face some losses. Right? So these losses, that is loss because of a uncertainty, it may be from labor side, it may be from the material side, and it may be from the equipment side. Right? So equipment means I'll be using a lot of construction equipments, right? So the cost of construction equipment may go high, or the wage of a construction equipment, it can go high, right? So if I am taking everything for rent, right? So if they are going to increase the rent, automatically the burden will be shifted to with me, right? So that is, I have to take this cost of construction equipment, right? So as the project cost risk analysis, right? So the idea here is very, very simple, right? So before considering a, making deal with any contract, right? So that is, say for example, whether you are taking a contract for 30 lakhs or 40 lakhs, right? So we need to keep all these things in mind, right? So before agreeing with any contract, we need to consider all these things. If something goes wrong, I should not be in a trouble, right? So in this way we need to think, right? So if we are considering this, that is a project cost risk, then I will not be signing this contract for 30 lakhs. Instead, I'll be signing this contract for 35 lakhs, right? So that 5 lakhs will be taking care of whatever the uncertainties like labor fare or the material price hike or the equipment issues, whatever it is, right? So that additional 5 lakhs of margin what I have, it will be taking care of all these uncertainties which arises during the project completion stages, right? So when I am executing something, automatically different challenges will come into picture, that if I am not able to consider this at the initial stages, automatically the project will go into a failure stage. And please remember, right? So if I am talking about this project management, the initial stages is always the toughest stage, right? So initial stage is always the toughest stage where we need to make sound decisions, right? So that is the biggest phase, the initial stage, right? So where we need to make a sound decisions about all these things, right? So this is about the project cost risk analysis, right? So always there is a risk of cost, right? So if I am agreeing with something, and yeah, there are different ways for looking into it, right? So that is whatever I told till now, it is a negative side, right? So there are some positive risks as well, right? So positive risk means, say for example, so now I am signing a contract for 30 lakhs for the construction of a building. So immediately after the signing of a contract, what happens is the steel prices drops, right? So now it is 75,000, right? So immediately after the signing of contract, if it falls to 50,000, right? So what happens? I will be in a profit, right? So risk is not always negative, right? So risk is sometimes positive, right? So how we are considering this is very important, right? So as a project team, the fall in the prices of a material is a good for me, but the fall in the prices of a material is not good for the person who has given contract to me, right? So for him it is a negative, for me it is a positive, right? So what you need to understand here is very simple: risks are not always negative, right? So there are some positive sides of risk and the negative sides as well, right? So the positive risk is, right, so after signing the contract, if the price of a material falls, if the price of a equipment falls, right? So if the laborers are jobless, say for example, right? So if the unemployment problem is more and more laborers are coming to the work, right? So for by negotiating those prices, instead of 500 rupees, if they are ready to work for 300 rupees, right? So easily it is a risk, but it is a positive side for me, right? So this is very, very important. Risk is not always negative, right? So there are positive sides of a risk as well, right? So as a project manager, the price fluctuations is a risk. If the price reduces, right, so it is not a negative risk, it is a positive risk. If the price rises, right, so it is a negative risk for me, right? So this is a clear idea about the project cost risk analysis. And the next important topic here is the cost overrun. So very simple to understand. Cost overrun is, right? So without going by the definition, I will just continue the explanation. The example what I have taken, I will continue with the example. So if I have taken one contract for 30 lakhs, so my idea here is to finish the contract within 25 lakhs, and I have to keep 5 lakhs as my project profit, right? So that is the intention with which I'm going to start the project. So here, sometimes what happens, because of some uncertainties, right? So the cost of the project will not stop at 25 lakhs and will not stop at 30 lakhs. even if it crosses the contract value of 30 lakhs, right? So there are possibilities that it may even end up by 32 lakhs, right? So that scenario is called as the cost overrun, right? So now I will go with the definition here. The term cost overrun refers to unexpected costs that end up exceeding a project budget. Cost overrun can occur in any project, and it's particularly common in construction, manufacturing, and software development projects. Cost overrun is also known as a cost increase or budget overrun and can be caused for several reasons. I'll be explaining what are all the different reasons which leads to this cost overrun. So how it affects the construction industry, I have given you the example. Next, manufacturing industry. Manufacturing industry, say for example, if I consider the manufacturing of a batteries, right? So manufacturing of batteries, right? So it requires whatever it is, right? So whatever if you consider any manufacturing industries, it requires some raw materials. Almost all manufacturing industries, right? So industry is one which converts the raw materials into finished goods. So here, if I consider a manufacturing industry, the raw material what we are using and what is the price of that raw material, it decides what is the cost of a product. If I use the raw material of higher prices, automatically the cost of a product will also be higher. So I'll be taking one contract to manufacture 50 mobiles, say for example, right? So not 50, I will be considering production of 5,000 mobiles. So here I'll be using a lot of chips, I'll be using a lot of ICs and other electronic devices for the manufacturing of mobile. At the time of signing of agreement, the prices are stable, and once I sign the agreement, the cost of all these electronic items shoots up. So from 1 rupee, if it goes to 2 rupees, from 20 rupees, if it rises to 30 rupees, automatically I have to incur some losses. So here, anyhow, I need to give the deliverables, right? So once the contract is signed, right? So it is always I need to stand to my words, right? So whatever price I have quoted, I have to receive that price and I have to give the deliverables, right? So here the possibilities are very high that the project may go cost overrun. I have signed the deal for 30 lakhs. If it is costing me 32 lakhs, right? So that kind of a project is called as a cost overrun projects or the budget overrun projects, right? So if the budget is exceeding the planned budget, automatically it is called as a cost overrun projects, right? So why it happens, right? So what are all the causes for this cost overrun? Here I'll be discussing after this time overrun, right? So first I will let you know what is this time overrun, right? So now it is very simple. You can easily understand what is time overrun, right? So if we are completing the project within the time, right? So then it is a successful project. If we are taking more than what is scheduled time, right? So that kind of a project is called as the time overrun projects. Right, so now going by the example, once again, I have taken a building construction example. So the time schedule is 3 months. Within 3 months, I need to complete the overall building. Now, instead of completing it in 3 months, if I take 5 months, then that project is called as the time overrun projects. Right, so now going by the definition, time overrun is the phenomena in which the project gets delayed beyond its expected completion time due to certain difficulties. Right, so once again, these difficulties may be anything. It may be the strike of laborers, it may be non-availability of machineries, it may be the non-availability of materials, whatever it is. Right, so those are the risks, right? So that leads to the time overrun of a project. More time is required to finish the project than initially planned. When I was scheduling this project, I am scheduling it for 3 months. Within 3 months, I'll be completing this project. In the middle of a project, right, so some issues arises. That is, say for example, if the things like corona, right, so I am completing, right, so the my building construction is in a halfway or in a midway, right, so this issues like corona and all, if it comes and all, automatically my project will get delayed, right? So even if it I have had faced some losses in terms of cost, right, so in terms of time as well, I need to face some losses, right? So this is a scenario where I need to face the losses, and this time overrun and cost overrun, it happens because of some uncertainties, right? So that uncertainties, right? So I can give some more example for this uncertainties, right? So the uncertainties will be some litigation, say for example, right? So you are taking one project contract and you are building one building, and there some litigations will come, right? So somebody will be coming and he will be claiming that the plot is not belonging to this owner, it is my belonging, right? That he can claim, and he can raise some legal issues. If some legal issues rises, and I will not be permitted to construct, right? So it will be kept in hold, and till I get my judicial copy of so this site belongs to this person, you can proceed with the building construction till I get that certificate, right? So I will not be permitted to build a building, right? So this is the legal issue, right? So likewise, different hurdles will come, right? So if something happens to the laborers, and the laborers will not be interested to work there, right? So there are some other examples I can say, right? So that will be acting as a hindrance for the project, which leads to the time overrun. In simple, time overrun is I'm taking more time than the scheduled one, right? So the scheduled is 3 months. Instead of 3 months, if I am taking 4 months, that is a time overrun project. Cost overrun project is one, I am consuming more budget than planned. The planned is 30,000 rupees, expenditure actual happened is 40,000 rupees, right? So that is always a cost overrun project, right? So now this is about the time overrun and the cost overrun projects, right? So why this happens, right? So why the project will become cost overrun and why it becomes time overrun, that I'll be discussing now. So what are the causes for the time and the cost overrun of a project? The first cause here is the inconsistency. Second one is the inaccurate project estimation. Third cause here is the lack of risk management. Fourth one is inexperience. Fifth one is low productivity levels. Sixth one is the unclear communication. And the seventh one is ineffective scheduling. These are the listed causes for the time and the cost overrun of a particular project. Inconsistency, right? So you know what is consistency, right? So consistently, if you are achieving some goals, say for example, if I consider the construction of a building, right? So if I am able to construct one building in 2 months, and if I have a legacy like this, right? So I have completed 10 buildings in 20 months, right? So that means in every 2 months I am able to complete one project, right? So that is called as a consistency. And here inconsistency means, right, so for one building if I take 5 months, right, so for another building if I take 3 months, for another building if I take 1.5 month, right? So this is the inconsistent way of the completion of a project, and this will lead to the time overrun and the cost overrun of a project. And this inconsistency, it may be thought in some other aspects as well, right? So that is, say for example, if I am hiring 10 number of laborers one day, if I am hiring 20 number of laborers another day, right? So 30 number of laborers another day, if I am not following consistency in hiring the laborers, automatically the productivity will get affected, and as the productivity is affected, automatically the time and cost will also get affected, right? So that is the reason why we need to have a better consistency in our work. And the second cause here is the inaccurate project estimation. Inaccurate project estimation means here we need to consider some risks, right? So before it comes and hit us, we need to consider all those. So what happens if the material prices goes high? Right, so that should be in our mind. So while signing the contract, right, so we need to give all these things a due consideration. What if the cost of material goes high? What if the cost of the wages goes high? What if the cost of materials, machineries, the different process will go high? So for that we need to give some buffer, or the contingencies we need to give. If we are failing to give all these contingencies, or if we fail to include all these costs into our project, then it becomes an inaccurate project estimation. Then automatically I need to face some cost, that is a loss. The project will go into loss. So that is why while estimating we need to consider what are all the things, right, so which are likely to come. Say for example, I am taking one project, and after taking project the climatic conditions are not supporting me. So once the climatic conditions are not supporting me, if it rains, automatically I have to stop my work, right? So if I am not able to predict this weather, if I am not able to consider the cost of materials, if I am not able to predict what will be the possible hike in the material price, what will be the possible hike in the cost of the labors, and automatically I cannot be able to prepare the project estimation, which is going to give me a profit. So this inaccurate project estimation means I'll be leaving some important points while preparing the estimates, right? Always it is a source of this cost overrun project. And next one, the lack of risk management. Here, if any risk comes, we need to mitigate the risk. Say, for example, I'm taking a project of 30 lakh rupees where I'm hiring around 10 employees. I'm hiring about 10 employees in my company. So I don't have any risk management plan here, right? So I have not taken insurance for my labors. If one labor he falls from the 10th floor or the 12th floor, right, so whatever the 30 lakhs I have collected from the vendor, I need to give to the labor family. Why I have to give it means I have not taken any risk management plans. If I have taken some risk management plans, like taking an insurance policy for my labor by paying 1000 rupees or 2000 rupees, then I can mitigate this risk, right? So lack of risk management is also one of the reason for the cost overrun projects. Next one is inexperience. Automatically every field requires experience. So if I don't have any experience, I cannot be able to manage the materials, I cannot be able to manage the machineries, I cannot be able to handle the labors, right? So that is a workforce. So here, experience plays a very important role. With the experience, we can manage all the three M's, that is the material, machinery, and the manpower in an effective way. That is the reason experience matters. Next is the low productivity levels. Here, productivity means what is the output. So if I am using 10 machineries, right, so I'll be having a benchmark outputs. So if I am using 10 machineries, that will be the output for every day. Say for example, if I am constructing a road, right, so if I'm hiring 20 number of this earth moving machineries, within 10 days, I can achieve this, right? So within 10 days, I can complete 1 kilometer construction of a road, right? With all these equipments, with all these workforce, if you are able to complete only half a kilometer of construction of road, right, so that is what called as the low productivity levels. If we are not able to manage the materials, if you are not manage the workforce effectively, automatically it results in the lower productivity rates, right? So lower productivity means you need to complete 1 kilometer in 15 days, you have completed half a kilometer, then automatically it is a time overrun project, right? So if you are not able to complete within the stipulated time, that is what called as the time overrun project. Low productivity is the significant cause for the time overrun project, and once if it is a time overrun project, automatically it will be contributing towards the cost overrun project. Okay. If I am not able to complete this within a time, automatically I cannot be able to make any profits out of this. That is why the productivity always matters. Next is the unclear communication, right? So unclear communication means, say for example, I am a project manager, right? So there are some persons, right? So who are working in a site. So here the communication between the project manager and the person who is working in the site is not clear. Say for example, before starting of a project, the project manager has to give a proper guidelines to the site engineer. So otherwise what happens, without proper guidelines, if the site engineer starts executing the project manager, if he visits and if he finds anything wrong over there, he will be changing that. So why you have constructed this wall, you sorry, say for example, so if the site engineers construct one wall that is unwanted, so project manager observes that this wall should not be here, right? So they will be giving instructions to remove that wall, right? So if something is not required in a project, right? So if the project manager and the site engineer are not in a direct communication, right? So this leads to different kind of a repair works, right? So unclear communication will always leads to the lagging projects, and even it will take certain costs as well. So that is the reason there should be a good communication between the project team who are involved in the construction of anything, right? So even if it is a manufacturing sector, right? So if there is no communication between the designer who designs the item and the persons who are involved in the production of item, automatically there will be some mismatch, and this mismatch will lead to the time overrun or the cost overrun projects. So that is why there should be a good communication between the different persons who are involved in the project. And next one, the ineffective scheduling. Ineffective scheduling means, while scheduling itself is right. So when I have to complete which part, right? So if I consider the building construction, right? So for the construction of foundation, it takes 15 days, right? So for the next level of construction, if it takes 10 days, right? So next level of construction, if it takes 15 days, right? So likewise, I need to schedule this different stages of a construction. If I am not capable of scheduling this properly, then automatically the planning will not be proper, and as per your plan, you are not able to execute. Say for example, right? So if it takes 15 days for the construction of foundation, right? So while planning, if you have allotted only 10 days, automatically what happens, right? So you cannot be able to complete this in 10 days. It will get extended to 15 days, right? So once it get extended to 15 days, the other works which was scheduled during this time will get hampered, right? So that is the reason ineffective scheduling is always a source of this time and the cost overrun project, right? So these are some of the listed causes for the time overrun and the cost overrun projects, right? Are you getting this? Please respond. Please respond.
Yes,
Whether you are understanding this.
yes, sir.
You want me to tell
Yes,
this
sir.
in Kannada?
No, sir.
So now you are comfortable with the language, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, fine. So now I'll be posing some quizzes, right? So it is interesting. Try to answer this without any options, or even you can take the help of options. Try to understand, try to give me the right answer for these questions. Risk management is one of the important jobs of who? Is the risk
Project
management a job of a client or an investor or a production team or a project manager? Who
project
is
manager.
responsible for this? Sorry?
Project
B.
manager.
Project manager.
Project manager. Very good. Risk management is the responsibility of a project manager, right? So who is in charge of a project, right? So the answer here is D. You have given a correct answer. I will go on to the next question here. The next question here is a document you use to capture all known risks is called, right? So here, risk log, risk list, risk register, and risk diary, right? So I have not discussed about this. I'll be discussing it here. So here, risk register means it's so we need to maintain a register, right? So that will be useful for documenting all kind of risks. If something happens, right? So we need to take this risk register and we need to enter, right? So what has happened, why it has happened, everything. So if we are capable of registering all these things, automatically it will help us in the next projects. So if we are taking some other projects, right, so there it will be serving as a benchmark, right? So here, the answer here is a risk register, right? So please make note of this. Risk register is a document which is used to capture all known risks in a particular project. So next, what is or are the ways to deal with the risk? Mitigate, transfer, contingency, all of the above. So mitigate means, I will try to explain all these things, then you can decide. So mitigate means I don't want to carry all my risks. I'll be mitigating this part to some others by paying some premium. This is mitigation. And transferring means I'll not be able to handle the risk. I'll be transferring this risk to someone, right? So contingency means here, as the price of a material goes high, right? So I'll not be able to take this risk. Therefore, I'll be adding some cost to the project under the contingency heading, right? So now, is it possible to tell what is the right answer now?
All of the above.
All of the
All
above.
of the above.
So option
If
D.
you want to complete the project successfully, some part of a risk is to be mitigated, some part of a risk is to be transferred, some part of the risk we need to be add in a contingency. That is why the answer here is all of the above. So this is the answer. So next, when is the risk and uncertainty in a project's life cycle at its highest? Try to answer this.
Start.
Start. Yes, very good. At the beginning itself, the risk will be highest, right? So we don't know what to do. We don't know how to start, right? So the risk will be the highest when the project is in the beginning stage, right? So that is why the answer here is the start. Next, which among the following is not a step in risk management? Design, identification, monitor,
Design.
mitigation.
Design. Design.
There is no question of design when it comes to the risk management. So we need to identify, we need to mitigate, we need to monitor. That's it. Therefore, the correct answer here is design. Yes. So many of you have given correct answers. Very good. Next, risk management is the responsibility of customer, developer, investor, project team.
Project team.
Project team.
Project team. Yes,
D, sir.
obviously the answer is project team. So project manager is responsible for taking the risk or the responsibility of taking risk. In the absence of project manager, the whole project team is responsible for taking the risk, right? So therefore, the answer here is the project team. So next, which from the following represents the correct project cycle, right? So this is not the question from the today's topic, right? So I just want to check whether how you have followed the yesterday's class, right? So for that I have put this question, right? So try to identify what is the sequence of the project cycle phases. Can you able to identify? Can you able to remember the previous class? What is the first phase, second phase, third phase, fourth phase?
B.
B, sir. B.
B.
B. Yes, sir. B.
Yes, the first stage here is initiating, next is planning, next is executing and closing. Very good, right? So this is just to check how you have followed the yesterday's class, right? So very good. This is the enthusiasm we were expecting, right? So this is
ಮಾನಿಟರಿಂಗ್ ಇರಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
sorry.
5 phases ಇದ್ದು ಸರ್.
Yes,
5 phases ಇದ್ದು ಸರ್, ಇಲ್ಲಿ 4 phases
yes,
ಇದಾವೆ ಸರ್.
4 phases, but we are concentrating here about the sequence. Are you getting?
ಎಸ್ ಸರ್.
Sequence is, so even I can give 3 options here. If I give initiating, executing, closing, right? So I need to arrange this in sequence. Are you getting?
ಓಕೆ
So
ಸರ್.
sequence is very important, right? So I should not be telling closing first, initiating last, like this. Sequence is very important. So why I have put this is in some textbooks, right? So there are 4 stages only. There are 4 phases for the project life cycle, and monitoring is excluded. In new editions, the monitoring is included, right? So that is the reason, right? So they may go with the old one or new one, right? So whatever it is, you must be able to answer that. That is the reason why I have included this, right? So monitoring is included now. That is why it has become the 5 phases, right? So this is about the project life cycle and the project risk management, right? So this is the correct answer, right? So many of you were able to give this correct answer, right? Yes, right. So now we are at the end of this session, right? So if you have any questions regarding the yesterday's and today's topic, you are free to ask, right? So feel free to ask any questions related to this. Any doubts do you have?
No, sir.
No doubts, right? So if you want to ask any doubts, right, so it is a time you can ask your doubts. Yes, if you don't have any doubts today, I think this is the second session, right? So I'll not be handling any sessions here onwards. I want to wish you a very good luck for your all your endeavors, right? So whether you are writing this DCET, whether you are joining engineering, or whether you are joining into some jobs, whatever it is, whatever you do, I wish you all the very best for your career, right? So thank you very much for your patience, right? So patiently you have listened, right? Thank you very much. I wish you all the best for all the students who are in the room. Thank you. Thank you, sir.